I declare that carried. We come now to item 9 on the agenda, which is a COVID briefing and an update from the Auckland Emergency Management Committee. I've got 3 people that may make some comments: Phil Wilson, Mace Ward, and from Auckland Transport, Roger Murphy. But we also have in attendance other officers, including Nick Hill and Pam Ford from Auckland Unlimited, if you have questions to them. What I'm proposing to do is, once we've heard from those that are going to speak to the item, that we combine both our questions and our comments. Because it's a fairly long agenda today, if I can ask people to be reasonably concise in terms of their comments and their questions on this. But it is what's dominating our world at the moment. So it's important that you do have the chance to raise any pressing matters that are on your mind. So Phil, if you're online, if I can ask you please to lead off the discussion.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora koutou katoa. Very good morning, Your Worship, councillors and colleagues online. It doesn't feel like it necessarily, but this is the 8th day of lockdown level 4, and a lot has happened and a lot has needed to happen in that time. We've got a reasonably broad briefing for you this morning in terms of scope. I want to point out that we're, complementing this forum, this briefing with continued online briefings. I'll talk more to that a little bit later. Arrangements are being made to bring other key partners in to those other briefings. I'm thinking Ministry of Social Development, Health, and so on, to address aspects of the response that they have the lead on. Today, in terms of format, I'll shortly hand over to Mace Ward. I've also asked Greg Morgan, the Auckland Emergency Management Welfare Manager, to speak for the particular reason that there is feedback from councillors and a need in the community for the welfare response to be spot on. And I know that in advance some councillors have signalled to me an interest in aspects of that. I will ask Nick Hill and Pam Ford to comment on the economic implications of the current lockdown scenario, and as the Mayor said, Roger Murphy from Transport on Auckland Auckland Transport Matters. Now I'll just signal we do have other people here. Paul Robertson, our new Health and Safety General Manager, and also the chair of the crisis team in the organisation in terms of organisational implications. We've got Taryn Crew and John Andrews from Community Services, Patricia Reid in terms of organisational matters, Peter Gussell in terms of financial matters, Dan Lambert and Joe Davidson from communications. So we can be directed by you in terms of questions, and folk are ready to address anything that comes up. Look, just a reminder to members, today's really about key regional and organisational aspects. We will use other channels and other briefings to deal with your more localised issues. Just a very few key highlight points from me before I hand over to Mace. Organisationally, look, we're sadly in a way we're practiced at this now. Our people are well equipped to work from home, and most are. It might not be appreciated, but a large number of staff can carry on in a relatively normal fashion with their work, and are doing so. Obviously, there are some people associated with direct service delivery in the community through facilities and such like who are compromised, and there is there is work underway with them to make the best use of their time. And of course, many have family responsibilities. So as an employer, we've got to be a bit flexible and a bit sensitive about how this experience is for staff working from home, and moderate our expectations a little bit as well. And that's common to all employers. Now, looking externally at the community, the first thing I want to clarify is that we're in a quite different situation to where we were last year in terms of who has the lead on key aspects of this, and Greg will explain this. But since last year, a lot has happened in terms of a shift in responsibility to Ministry of Social Development, for example, coordination of the network of food banks and the supply lines in that regard. The formal, I won't go into the technicalese about this, but the level of formal activation of emergency management sees us more in a support and monitoring role, stepping in as needed rather than having the outright lead and needing to do certain other things that were a feature of last year. But yes, we do need to step in. We do need to step in the event that there are community needs and issues that are not being met. So there is some careful monitoring going on. As I said, 8 days into this lockdown, things have been compared to last year in terms of welfare demand, but of course we can expect that to accelerate fast the longer we are in lockdown and as needs become more acute in the community. We are starting to see requests from our partners for direct support, and Mace will mention that. Things like staff for contract tracing, welfare calls, and the such like, those are stepping up, and we will step into that place and are ready to do so. We have the machinery and the organisation to make that a reality. And just finally, and back to the communication effort, I wanted to thank members, both governing body members, but also the local board chairs in particular, who are an important mechanism in terms of communication into the community, leadership messaging, public health messaging, and such like. We want to support you in doing that, and to that end, and in terms of the rhythm that we're putting in place going forward, there will be at least one fulsome online briefing for you offered per week, and at least 2 communication briefings per week, and more as needed as things change. That's on top of us being a conduit for some of the government messaging and such like. So, Your Worship, I'll pause at that point and I'll ask Mace to come online now.
Thanks, Phil. Mace, are you there?
I am. Morena tātou, Mayor Phil, councillors, and everyone else. Thank you very much for the time to provide an update today. As Phil said, I have Greg Morgan as Group Welfare Manager and support today. So as we're aware, just to recap, the government confirmed on the 23rd of August that New Zealand will remain under lockdown 4 until 11:59 on until Friday the 27th of August, but Auckland is expected to remain in alert level 4 until at least Tuesday 31st of August, and that'll be confirmed on Monday. The decision on alert levels for the rest of the country will be made on Friday, and that may result in some border and boundary controls, which we're Auckland Emergency Management and our other partners, particularly the New Zealand Police, Waka Kotahi and Auckland Transport, are ready to assist in how those boundary areas are managed. I would acknowledge that those boundaries may exist outside of our region in Waikato or Northland as well. So the government has also announced that as we shift back down to alert levels, record keeping will be mandatory for some businesses, including cafes, restaurants, bars, casinos, concerts, aged care facilities, excluding patient centres, and other functional facilities and services. Further information is expected, of course, in due course, and I would encourage everyone just to keep updated on the Unite Against COVID website as a one point of source of the truth. So in terms of community testing centres, there are 19 community testing centres available across Auckland, including an additional 5 which have restricted access that are by invitation only for high risk groups and to prioritise essential healthcare workers. 6 regular community testing centres and 12 pop-up testing centres. Many of these testing centres are on council property, whether that's car parks, parks, or and in community facilities across our region to help support the response to COVID-19 and this resurgence. There are a number of new ones being set up recently, including at Mountford Park in Manurewa, Pukapoi Showground, and more recently, whilst outside the region, still serving some of our Aucklanders at Tuakau Rugby Club, League Club, and Waikato. The Ministry of Health, of course, is reminding people that they only need to get tested if they were in a location of interest at specific dates and times, or are a close contact or with a positive case, or have a cold or flu-like symptoms. If people are identified as being close contact or have visited a location of interest, they should self-isolate and call Healthline for further instruction. Auckland Health authorities, whom we're working closely with, are also urging anyone else who requires a test to contact the GP, designated practice or an urgent care clinic to see if they have testing availability before attending a community testing centre, and this will help with wait times and traffic congestion around our testing site. Our information coming from health authorities last evening was that there's been a record week for COVID testing in Tamaki Makaurau, with more than 150,000 community tests registered by the city's laboratories since last Wednesday, which is an outstanding response from Aucklanders. They particularly commended communities that identified as one of our 8 Pacific ethnicities, who make up 28,000 of those tests, the highest rate of testing per population group across New Zealand. They also noted, as of yesterday afternoon, the majority of community testing centres had no wait times or wait times of 15 minutes or less, which, as you will all be aware, is a significant change from earlier in the week and last week. But just now turning a bit more to Auckland Emergency Management's COVID-19 response. As Phil Wilson commented, we are in very much a support role with the National Emergency Management agencies and our other government partners across the region and across New Zealand. But we have a number of things going on. So our focus has been on liaising with those government and partner agencies to establish the level of need in Auckland, as well as pushing all of government messages on our channels, website and social media into our community so that they're well informed about how to behave and how to stay safe. We're in a different position, as Phil noted, from the first time. We're in alert level 4, with government departments now ready to scale up. They're set up and prepared to respond quickly and to offer support. We're more at the bottom or ready to respond if some of those things either fail or there's a scalability issue. Ministry of Social Development is taking a lead on providing welfare support, and I will ask Greg to comment shortly on how we're supporting that process. For people particularly focused on people who cannot afford food and other essentials, and or those people who may be sleeping rough. For people who can't afford food and essential food supplies, the first step is to contact Work and Income, and a range of hardship support is available, including for food. And in the elected member update that went out to all of you last evening, there are some really good links that you can share with your community in that update. I'd encourage you to do so. Some people are isolating at home are supported with welfare needs by Health and its network providers and MSD Community Connected. However, we know there is an emerging need caused by accessibility issues rather than affordability issues, and that is the focus of our welfare response. We're currently setting up a welfare desk, ably supported by our Connected Communities department, and particularly the librarians, that will be used to assess the eligibility level of need of those applying for support and redirect callers to the relevant agencies for support. So really a triage and helping people get to the services they need quickly and with ease. As Phil mentioned, we won't be setting up our own welfare distribution centre for food on this time, but we will instead work with established food providers such as Bid Food, and also support the food banks across our region, who really have an excellent network and are well tapped into their community. And it's been part of the resilient and work that Auckland Emergency Management's done over the last 12 to 18 months, and of course for some time. All of this is likely to sound very familiar to you, as much of that information was sent out last night, and as I said, I would encourage you to share that information on your social network and through your community channels. Just a quick note really around support for rough sleepers. We've been asked questions about the rough sleeping community, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the work of the group that consistently provide that wraparound support for those people in our region that sleep rough or need support and are particularly vulnerable. They have again scaled up their efforts and resourcing to provide what's needed under this lockdown, and I think we should all commend that. In terms of those Auckland Emergency Management partners, MSD is the lead agency for emergency housing support, including for rough sleepers and homeless people, and we'll work with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and other agencies as required to ensure people have a safe, dry place to sleep and spend lockdown in. Other work that's been occurring across Auckland Council has been support for Auckland City Mission, and council teams are also supporting the City Mission to adapt to changing circumstances, in particular how they keep their staff safe and service running while physically distancing and individuals may need to isolate. This includes looking at how we can use our own council facilities, and we're arranging access to Western Spring Garden Community Hall, for example, to support the Street to Home team to continue their assertive outreach work. And also planning for the Federal Street Plaza under 135 Albert Street for meal pack distribution if the Auckland City Mission's Union Street facility needs to close for some reason. Additionally, there's been access for the Pride project in Manarewa at Te Matari, Glendon, to use that facility to also scale up for food distribution. Vision West reached out to the welfare team last week for support to organise on-site COVID-19 testing for residents at their transitional housing apartments in Avondale, and the council connected them to help to arrange that to occur. Both Council and Auckland Emergency Management Welfare staff are keeping in touch with Housing First Auckland and other housing outreach providers, and they have not yet requested any specific assistance, but have noted that support is appreciated and that we are ready to assist when needed. So that includes, we are doing some planning around being able to surge and scale up and provide for requests of direct support. Some of that direct support has gone into the Northern Regional Health Group from people to help with logistics. So we've got 5 people assigned to that, being assigned to those roles. 12 people on our welfare desk, as I mentioned earlier, and we have some people, environmental health officers and others helping with contact tracing as well. We have had some targeted communications for impacted communities. The Ministry of Health is the lead agency for this, and we'll continue to use their messaging and push it through our channels to help increase that engagement so people stay safe and well. And finally, we're encouraging people to continue to use the covid19.govt.nz website for all the latest updates that we also get, of course, at 1 o'clock every day. I wonder if I could also ask just Greg Morgan just to provide a really short update on how he's been as Group Welfare Manager supporting the welfare agency. Greg.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Mace. I think just in addition to what you've said, I would just like to emphasise that I'm working with MSD and the Northern Region Health Coordination Centre every day. What we've built in effect is a model for a kind of shared assessment centre. Now, not an assessment centre that's going to send whānau around to many points of contact with multiple needs assessments, but so that we can look together and monitor where needs are arising that are not being met. So we're really focused in on surge capacity to support community providers where demand might outstrip what they can manage, but also those specialist teams that are in place with the Northern Regional Health Coordination Centre, the teams that are supporting whānau, in very culturally appropriate ways. With large numbers of people isolating at home, we can see that we might be needed to step in and to take over some of the workload, some of the assessments for people who otherwise might not be got to quickly. Our team's also ready to undertake any outbound calling that might be asked of us by MSD or the Northern Regional Health Coordination Centre. Councillors, you'll remember that last year the Council supported MSD outbound calling to older people. So we've certainly signalled our interest to MSD to be involved in any calling that would really support whānau at home, and the mechanism that we have in place with this working together in this kind of virtual assessment centre structure will certainly support that. So, yeah, that's a bit of operational detail for you just to show how it's coming together. And we can continue to draw from council teams. So the 12 people in our welfare response at the moment can be added to with others, particularly as we take on other tasks that are asked of us. And just one last thing, although this is a big regional overview, where we are identifying there are some local issues, we can hop in and help link partners up and do some problem solving. So MSD is really encouraging the community food sector to share and partner, and they've got quite good structures in place for that. But occasionally, and it happened this week, there have a couple of gaps where we can use our connections to help people reach solutions. So we're active to that as well. Kia ora. Thanks.
Phil Wilson again. Thank you, Greg. Your Worship, with your indulgence, I'll just ask Nick Hill and Pam Ford, and then immediately following them, Roger from Auckland Transport for a brief comment, and that will wrap up the briefing part of this.
Kia ora koutou. Good morning. The emerging view of business is actually pretty pessimistic about the likelihood that we're going to remain at level 4 and informs a lockdown for quite some time to come. And in that respect, it's there are parallels with where we were in March and the middle of last year with where we are now, but there are also quite a few differences. So I'll just run through 5 things that we're picking up. And if you remember back to around the middle of last year, the economists were predicting some pretty significant unemployment outcomes for Auckland, and also paradoxically forecasting lower house prices. None of that happened. And I think the first point I want to make is around the government's response and financial support. The wage subsidy was probably the significant response from the government from an economic point of view last time. The government has confirmed that it's making a wage subsidy available, but it's only done that for 2 weeks. The second thing that the government has introduced this time, which is new, is a resurgence payment. That payment is a cash payment. It's kind of skewed towards smaller businesses, but it helps to deal with a problem last time that no one ever really quite solved, which was around the cost of rental accommodation for businesses and the unwillingness of many landlords to necessarily offer discounts or financial support for it. So that does address that issue to some degree. The thing that the government hasn't done this time is provide support as they did last time through Auckland Unlimited, or ATID as it was, around the Regional Business Partner Program. They're unlikely to do that. We don't think that that's a bad decision. A lot of that advice was that money was geared towards supporting smaller businesses to make adjustments to deal with the world that we're now in. So a lot of that has actually happened, and it's not something you necessarily would need to repeat. One comment though I've had from a senior business leader this morning is that given the wage subsidy is only committed for 2 weeks, there is a sense in the system that there's not as much cash in support of businesses. And I think it's that uncertainty and the virulence of the virus that generates quite a lot of nervousness in the system at the moment, possibly even more than there was previously. The second point is the nature of Delta and its virulence. And one of the things that's playing out at the moment is where you find an individual who is infected then driving stand-downs of whole teams of individuals because of its virulence. And then those individuals either having to be replaced, but also the degree to which they get supported at home and the degree to which companies can continue to do that. In our own case at Auckland Unlimited, we've got the issue with the zoo. If somebody at the zoo is found to have been infected with Delta, we need to stand down probably everybody in the zoo, and we need to then find a team to replace them to feed the animals. So that's the second concern, and that is different from last time, or more severe. The third issue we're heading towards is a split economy where the rest of New Zealand opens up and Auckland remains locked down. Last week there was some comment from senior government officials that last time they were concerned that the border was too liberally managed in terms of who could pass across it, and that created lots of challenges, and that they were in favour of a tighter lockdown. However, at the same time, I think the government is increasingly aware that Auckland manufactures and distributes a lot of essential services, essential goods such as food, and how that would work across the border. So I think there's some real challenges around the real likelihood that Auckland remains locked down, the way in which the border is managed, the impact on the economy more generally, and the flow of workers across that border. We faced that, and was a problem last time. I don't think it was ever satisfactorily resolved. The fourth issue is around vaccinations and testing. I think there is very, very strong support from the business community that the way out of all of this is to lift the level of vaccination and testing. There's work going on towards achieving site-based testing in large businesses of over 1,000 employees, and sort of developing the ability to do that. But an issue that starts to arise, which we've seen in New South Wales, is what happens when some workers are vaccinated and others aren't. Are we going to move to mandating workers being vaccinated if they're going to be able to be let into a workplace? I think there are businesses already who are starting to move in that direction. And if workers are not vaccinated, the extent to which we move to, as they have in New South Wales, testing workers every day. And that then raises the question around things like saliva testing and the efficiency of the testing regime. But if I just can emphasise that there is a very strong commitment and a view from businesses that the way through all of this is upping the vaccinations and the testing. The last point I want to make, and this is more of a positive, is that the economy and the markets themselves are actually very strong. We went into lockdown with huge issues around skills, particularly highly skilled people, particularly, as we know in the council, people such as the tunnelling engineers, the people working in the construction sector with particular skills. But it's across the board, and this issue won't go away, but also that there's demand. And I think one thing business has learned through the last 18 months is that actually the business comes back, and that we're in a cycle. The question is how deep and how long, and our ability to survive it, but that the demand will come back. I think also this time we have had 18 months of severe constraints on business, and we do have the inevitable filtering out of those weaker businesses, and that probably businesses are possibly more resilient now 18 months on than they were previously, but a lot will depend on the government's response and the issues of things such as the wage subsidy. I'm not sure whether you want to add anything to what I've set out here.
Thanks, Nick. Kia ora tātou. I'll just add 2 points in addition to Nick's points. One, around some of the feedback we are hearing from businesses, and 2, update on some of the practical things that we are doing for business. Our business teams are connecting with industry groups and contacts as usual, and some of the feedback, I acknowledge that all of you councillors are working very hard with your communities as well, and some of this will be quite familiar. Here we go. Hospitality industry is concerned about assuming the responsibility for enforcing mandatory signing in, so more compliance for businesses to take on, and that will be across other sectors as well. The conferences are being cancelled outright, with clients fed up or unable to accommodate repeat postponements. We're seeing a lot of trade shows cancellations, many of them second, third or fourth time. So that has a lot of flow-on impact onto support workers. SMEs, small businesses, are reporting a very good response time and service for the government financial support. And the 0800 Business Helpline, which is a government-funded helpline run by the EMA, is averaging about 300 to 500 calls per day, mainly asking about how to access government support. We've not seen any increase in businesses looking for the advisory support through the RBP that Nick mentioned. And to that end, what are we doing? We did reach out last week as quickly as we could to our large database of businesses, with the EDM linking them to all the government support, and there is a lot there. There's the wage subsidy, the resurgent support payment that Nick mentioned, small business cash flow, tax support, insolvency relief for businesses, short-term absence relief, and leave support scheme. As Phil said earlier, we're working as a conduit, like council, a conduit for governments, so keeping very close to MSD and MB and feeding that information on. And 8 days in, we're seeing that businesses have felt quite comfortable in this first week, but again, we expect that as the lockdown goes into possibly week 3 and week 4, we'll see a bit of an increase in uncertainty. That's all I have for now. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll pass back to Phil.
Who will go directly to Roger Murphy, if I might, to wrap up? Thanks, Roger.
Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, councillors. Auckland Transport stood up its crisis management team about 2 weeks before we went into lockdown in the expectation that we were heading in this direction. The impact on public transport first. Pre-COVID, you would have heard me talk about 300,000 passenger trips per day. Just before lockdown, we had got our numbers back to around 240,000 trips a day, so we're tracking back up again quite nicely. We've now gone back down to 17,000 trips a day, and roughly during the week we're tracking at between 4.2 and 4.9% of pre-COVID levels, and at the weekend about 7 to 8%. That highlights the importance at the weekend in particular of providing public transport services for essential service workers. We're picking up on that quite a bit. We have put in weekend schedules plus some additional services for hospitals and the like. We've closed and made safe 39 construction sites, and we're also maintaining site checks for safety reasons on a regular basis, both ourselves and with our contractors. And we're regularly communicating with around about 950,000 of our customers through electronic data messaging to continually update them and refresh our messaging around mask wearing and scheduling and timetables and other things that we're looking to keep them aware of. We've been in touch with the Ministry of Health to assist with traffic management around the testing sites that were talked about earlier and the vaccination centres. And in terms of our own essential service workers, we've got around 6 groups of workers across the organisation operating in essential services, from our customer service centres through to our parking and transport offices and our people operating our operation centre as well. We're assisting the MOH, as we did before, with data sets for specific bus routes, but of course with the 480 heading towards 500 locations of interest, about 77 of those relate to bus trips, so that's quite an increase on last time. So that's obviously got its challenges with it. We're planning for any moves either to stay at alert level 4, as has been previously discussed, or to alert level 3, and also to assist the police with the location of the boundary checkpoints and so on. In terms of our communications, then we're using our communications, as I said, with our 950,000 customers through electronic data messaging, through our website, through social media, through our contacts, customer service centres and our contact centre. And in terms of deep cleaning, which is something that we get a lot of queries about, we have done the electrostatic fogging, the clean of our full fleet, buses, trains and so on. So that's quite a significant number of vehicles, and we continue to do that, and also do deep cleaning of high touch areas. And things like, small things like the pedestrian crossings, it's around 200 odd pedestrian crossings across the city where we've put the pedestrian call on automatic, so that I need to press the buttons on the crossings. I will stop at that point, Your Worship, and be available for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger, Pam, Nick, and Mace, Gary, and Phil. Sharon has moved the recommendation to receive the report and thank those for giving it. I'll second that. So what we'll do now is we'll take questions and comments together, as I suggested before, and I'll just work through the list. So if you can focus on what you think is most important and try to keep the questions and comments fairly concise, please. So let's start. I think at the top of the list was Shane Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, my only comment is that's absolutely wonderful update, team. So thank you for everybody for providing for that. Really great. I suppose this is more of a general kind of basic question, but if we're receiving questions around the vaccine rollout or testing sites or any of those kind of more central government related responsibilities, where would you suggest that we direct those questions? And I've got a bit of a follow-up after that. I'm not sure who wants to answer it.
Right. Default questions always go back to Phil Wilson. So yeah. Phil.
Two parts to the answer, Councillor Henderson. In the first instance, and as I've said previously, I would like you to direct specific queries through your CSA, who will know who to pass it on to, and it's just a way of sort of coordinating what would otherwise be a large number of disparate requests. So, but Mace may also want to comment. We will follow up on your behalf with the health agencies around the specific answers if we can't answer them ourselves. But Mace, do you want to comment?
Kia ora, Phil. Just briefly, I think yes, certainly through your CSAs, Councillor Henderson would be preference, as Phil mentioned, but also looking at United Against COVID-19 website has some really good up-to-date information as a first port of call, but certainly understand if you've got some specific things through your CSAs. Thank you.
Cool, thanks team. Yeah, and I guess where I'm going with that question is that we sort of appreciate that you're working extremely hard, everyone on the call, and doing a lot of work, and with obviously having to juggle all the other pressures that lockdown has as well. So yeah, I think that we should appreciate that as councillors and sort of just think about that. But yeah, through the CSAs, I think that's a good idea. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane, and we'll try to keep these briefings on a regular basis if we retain, as I expect we will, level 4 and then level 3 lockdowns. We have regular communication, daily calls into the Prime Minister's office. I'm recommending to Cabinet that we have a liaison minister again, as we had with Carmel Cepoloni, and I'm keeping in touch with the regional health authorities on vaccinations and things like that. So if you've got, if you've got certain issues that you think need to be raised at that level, please feel free to contact my office, probably through Claire at this stage as well. Okay, second question is Councillor Angela Dalton.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the excellent update and for all of the hard work. Mace, thank you for the efficient turnaround on Te Matariki for food parcel distribution yesterday. My question is around the testing. So curiosity, actually, we're told how many tests are done each day, and so if we're saying there's 150,000 done so far, does anyone have the number of what are processed? So they talk about 60,000 tests processed a day, but where are we in terms of getting the test results for those? So is there a lag time?
Okay, who's best placed to answer that? We may not have the specific answer. I know that it's taking, because of the sheer number, and I think Richard Hill's put up before that it's 50% higher than ever before. There is a delay, and we're trying to get on, obviously the health authorities are trying to get on top of that. But Mace, do you have a specific answer on that at all?
Thank you, Worship. No, I don't, Councillor Dalton, but what I can do is ask for that type of information to be, so we can report that back from health.
Thank you. Look, it's not urgent, it's a curiosity. I think evidence is when we're going to peak. If we knew how many tests have been, the results have come back from the processing. So thank you for that. Don't put it top of your list. Thanks.
It's a good question though, and I see Josephine's comment in the sidebar. It is taking, in her case, that's 4 or 5 days. I'll raise that again with the regional health authorities too, just to see if what can be done. maybe doing it at peak at the moment, but it's obviously important because otherwise people are in limbo and they don't know whether they, if they've been tested and they have symptoms or they've been at a location, they should be self-isolating, and that's quite difficult. So it's obviously desirable to get the test in as quickly as possible. And I'll raise a question about whether we can get assistance from elsewhere in New Zealand for Auckland as well, because the bulk of the testing is obviously happening where the bulk of the cases are, which is here. Right, Sharon Stewart, next question.
Thank you. I just want to also thank Greg Morgan. He's been very helpful in our community. Just when we were advised of new locations in the community, because they come out almost daily, what I've been told, and listening to 1ZB, a lot of people are turning up to be tested the moment this confirmation comes out. And what I've been told is that it takes around about 5 days before you actually become contagious. So we might be having a lot of people that are going to get tested. The message has to go out there if that's so that it's 5 days before you're contagious, that you need to self-isolate at home, and then around about day 5, that's when you go and get tested, because otherwise you're going to go and get tested on day 1 and you might not be contagious, and then you have to go back again in another 4 or 5 days and get tested again. So we're getting a lot of testing done that may need to, people need to be told that they need to wait.
Your Worship, Phil Wilson here. I think rather than give public health advice in this forum, that's a point we will follow up with some very clear communication after the meeting. I think the right thing to do is to direct folk to the formal public health advice on the COVID website as to what they should do. But I'll circulate something to councillors in relation to Councillor Stewart's point afterwards.
Yeah, I'm conscious of the fact that our officials don't have the expertise of the health authorities, and it may be that we can get somebody at a subsequent meeting from somebody senior from our health authorities, if they're not worked off their feet, to do a quick briefing of councillors. What we can send out to people is the message that they want us to. Please don't go to get tested unless you're symptomatic, unless you're a close contact, or unless you've been at a location of interest at the time specified, because we don't want our system bogged down with people getting testing just because, I thought I'd check anyway, kind of thing. So we can help with those public. Councillor Alfilipaina.
I just had one other.
Sorry, Sharon. Yeah, back to you.
Okay, just another one. Apparently, once again on 1ZB this morning, they were talking about that apparently it's not mandatory to scan when you go to a supermarket, and it'll become mandatory when we change to another level. Can we get confirmation on that? Because there was a lot of discussion on that this morning, very early this morning. Thank you.
Okay, so the question is, when is it mandatory to scan? And the government has announced changes in that regard, so that it will be in more locations, but not all. Okay, Councillor Alfilipaina.
Tēnā koe te rangatira, and mihi kia koutou katoa to our staff. Hey, look, Your Worship, I must probably tie in the questions and comments as you suggested. What I'm hearing out there, and I have no doubt at all that all our councillors have, is that with the last lockdown, we had ngā matarai as part of the Auckland Emergency Management. Can I confirm that Te Kotahi Tamaki, the Marae Collective, are looped in with that from a Māori and a Pacifica perspective? Can I also confirm with either Phil Wilson that the IMSB, in regards to, again, a conduit with our Māori community, is part of the discussions moving forward. And I just wanted to ask around other agencies. I know, for example, Your Worship, and to the team, that we've got a Māori and Pacifica provider, Turuki Health, whose phones ended up shutting down because of the volume of calls they were receiving in light of Otahuhu College now being one of the places of interest. We've already had, as Councillor Bartley would have mentioned, Otahuhu, Macaulay and De La Salle. So are those agencies going to be supported from Auckland Council? So that's the first of three questions, possibly, Your Worship.
Mace.
That one may go to Mace, I think.
Kia ora, Councillor Philippina. Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. There's regular Pannui going out from Ngā Matarai across Tamaki for the Marae Collective, as well as iwi, and Independent Māori Statutory Board have been looped into that, providing information of how to connect with the appropriate for the appropriate support. We are, of course, keeping a watching brief and feedback about where need is required, and we will respond to that as well.
Thanks, Alf. You've got another question there?
Yes, please. So, Your Worship, just want to acknowledge your office around the funnel we have tomorrow with our Pacifica providers, namely the 4 North South Seas and others, and also with the 10:30 meeting. Your Worship, I think it'll be important as well to get a very similar one with at least an update from the group that Mace has just mentioned around Māori as well, because I know that the messages around Pannui and the levels, yes, I know they're on the Ministry of Health website, but in particular from us, that needs to go out to Ngā Matarai, but also from there to the Marae Collective, to all our groups. But I think a discussion needs to be had, Your Worship, around how we can help other agencies by utilising our staff, similar to what our kitchen staff, or catering staff, not kitchen, catering staff are doing with the Auckland Mission, and with utilising our staff. I think we need to have a look as to how we can assist the likes of Turuki Health, instead of saying, no, well, look, that's under the Ministry of Health, let them work on that, and we'll just conduit for sending out messages. So look, that's my challenge to yourself, Your Worship, and for the team, because I know everybody's hurting, but I'm getting continuous calls from not only Pacifica, from Māori, as all the other elected members are getting, and I think we need to look outside the square in regards to assisting our communities that are obviously being hit. So look, that's really my kōrero, Your Worship.
Thanks for that, Alf, and you will have seen in the sidebar that Phil Wilson will pick that up. I'll be attending, along with the Pacifica councillors, the Pacific Phono meeting. I think it's tomorrow morning, and we have a particular worry, as everybody's aware, that close to 2/3 of our new cases are Pacifica, largely through the super spreader event at the Assembly of God in Mangere. And I've asked for the head of vaccination in Auckland just to give me more details, both for the Māori and for the Pacifica communities, about how we can get those vaccination numbers up as well. And that's looking quite promising, and the latest material that I've seen coming through, and having the 0800 number for Pacific communities, and also prioritising the Pacific and Maori communities through things like the Auckland Airport Park and Ride drive-through, which I think hit 2,900 people a day before yesterday, and possibly even more yesterday, and again at the Henderson Trust Board through the Waiparera Trust. So I think we do need to step those areas up, absolutely, Alf, and we're pushing for that to happen. Okay, let's go now to Councillor Richard Hills.
Kia ora, Chair, everyone, thank you. Just on that contact tracing thing, it's really important that we don't put any message out apart from look at what's next to the location, because there's various different things. Some say stay home and don't test at all, some say 5 days, 12 days, some say, but it's alongside every single, so if someone's looking at the locations, it's very clear what you need to do alongside that location. And Delta is can be contagious up to 2 days, they're finding, so it's just important to just look at that and not put up different things. My questions mostly, one is on supermarkets, but first my AT questions. I'm not sure if we're getting the subsidy from the government, but is there a way we are looking to make public transport free for essential workers again like last time? I mean, 17,000 people who are doing the work while we are at home. I feel we should be trying to make the barriers the lowest possible. That's just one question. And the other thing on AT, I was working with AT before the lockdown on issues around bus drivers. There's massive issue with cancellations the last couple of months. But are we still working on that recruitment process while we're in the situation so we can be ready afterwards? And also, are we getting someone to put the scanning codes back on every seat? So I'd heard from the bus companies that it was now their responsibility, whereas I think a couple months ago AT were printing them out and sending them or something, and so now the bus companies before lockdown were saying that they just didn't have the money or time to be doing the scanning codes like they were before, and that potentially has caused some issues now with so many bus locations. Most of them haven't been scanned in, and most of them haven't been able to identify which bus they were, because most people just go, oh, I got the 18, but I don't know exactly which one. But there was no codes on the seats, so I guess being, for now, are we doing that work at the moment?
That one's for you, Roger, I think.
Yes, I think there were three questions there, Councillor asked. First of all, in terms of fares, we are operating differently to before, that we are still charging at the moment. We have not got any funding yet. We have been operating so far with everything that we've been doing with our existing budgets and expenditure. We are making approaches to see what we can do to get funding, and I think the Mayor has been involved in that as well. So to your point, we will be looking at that, but we are dependent on central government funding if we go further down that track, to the Councillor's question. Second question, in terms of bus drivers, it's fair to say with 77 bus trips being identified, a number of bus drivers are also self-isolating, and in terms of the bus driver shortage, that obviously creates a little bit more of an issue and a challenge, but at the moment our operators are coping. There are a significant number of drivers that are self-isolating. There are a number of drivers who, because of their age and other health reasons, might be considered to be vulnerable, and so are self-isolating as well and unavailable to work. And then there's a general bus driver shortage, as you would be aware. But we do have it under control, and we're working with our operators in that regard at the moment. While the benefit that we have with operating with the weekend schedules is that it takes that demand for drivers down. So we have it under control at the moment, but monitoring it closely. I think the third question was in relation to scanning codes on seats, on buses and trains. The answer to that is we have done a reprint of our codes. It costs us $25,000 a time every time we do that to assist our operators, and we're refreshing all of those, have been refreshing those in the last week, and we'll continue to do that going forward. There is an expectation that our operators are stepping up to that plate as well, but we have assisted them in the last week.
Thank
I
you.
think I've covered all of your questions, Councillor.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess my comment on that is that maybe it's for the Mayor and Phil Wilson. That's something, if it's $25,000, we should be asking the government for that, because lockdown's costing us $1.5 billion, and I know that over the last couple of months those scanning posters almost disappeared off my buses, and if that's helped cause the spread, then that's or the contact tracing, slowing down the contact tracing, I think that's pretty serious. And my last comment, and it's probably more of a concern, I know we know the supermarket issue. I'm in contact with Countdown, who say that it is becoming worse, and I know that Westgate's now closed today. There is becoming a tipping point where suddenly, especially older persons and people who can't drive, we're going to be left without food, and that could become a serious issue if we keep getting these supermarkets closing down at alarming rates. And I think it's up to something like 2,500 supermarket staff in Auckland are now isolating across both organisations. So I don't know what the plan is, but I am very worried that it could create some backlash or protests or whatever. People without food no longer want to isolate, etc. So that's just my concern. But otherwise, thank you all for doing massive amounts of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Just a couple of points. I have written to the Minister asking what the plans from Waka Kotahi are in terms of subsidy. Be really important if we could get that back. Secondly, in terms of the supermarkets, obviously everybody's keeping a close eye on that, and we have got, I'm worried about the people that have said that they are isolated at home, the whole family is under lockdown, they might not be able to get their groceries through family or neighbours. We've got the student volunteer army out there, including, and maybe in particular on the shore, that's doing a great job. And I've talked to Mace this morning about whether we can give more assistance in that area if there's any shortfall, just to make sure that there is that way of people being able to get their food supplies by ordering it online if they're not allowed to go out. So we're keeping that one under watch at the moment. Right, I've got 3 more questions and then we'll finish this session and take a break. As you've seen, there's been some audio issues that we need to sort out, so it'll be a 5-minute break after the end of that. My last 3 questions are from Pippa, Daniel and Wayne. So Pippa Coombe, next, please.
Tēnā koe kora matua, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you for the update and the tremendous work in terms of responding so quickly to the lockdown. I appreciate that the team's having to respond to many different communities and different levels of vulnerability, but I really do just need to ask this on behalf of city centre residents, because the emergency response has sort of exacerbated previous concerns that they've raised around how communications go out and how the response is directed towards people who live in apartments. And again, I know this is really a question for Phil. I know that you're aware of this, but I just would like to know what is being looked at in terms of how we're communicating for city centre residents and particularly their needs. And we saw, for example, like getting the testing centre up and running, where Chloe put a lot of work into that, to ensure there was a testing centre that people could actually walk to, because there was sort of an assumption that everyone drives, whereas over 50% of city centre residents don't actually have cars. So I guess the question is just around the need to tailor some of the response to people living in a very different way in the city centre, particularly in apartments, who need to have communication and messaging and support because of their apartment living that is quite different to the rest of Auckland. So just would appreciate an update there. But thank you very much for all of the updates that have been provided from the whole team. It really is impressive to see just how quickly everything is put into action on the ground.
Thanks, Pippa. We did we did take up the issue of city centre testing centre, and we, as you saw, we got the Victoria Park testing place in the car park there open. On the apartments, I had a discussion with with Phil this morning, and with Mace. There are different circumstances. We're using common lobbies, etc. I might ask Mace or Phil just to comment on that briefly, please.
Your Worship, yes, I'm aware of the issue, and I've seen some of the comment, shall I put it that way, from City Centre Residents Association. We'll pick up on we'll try and get some specific communications out. I want to be careful not to overpromise, however, and yes, it's an important and unique community within the overall Auckland landscape, but it's also less than 5% of our population. So I don't want to overpromise in terms of customised communications to all of our different communities. So we'll look at that and perhaps liaise with you after this, Councillor.
Oh, thank you. Can I just add, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, Mayor, it's not just so much the communications, it's also just this being prepared when we're not in a sort of emergency for the next, like when we had the fire, convention centre fire, again, this issue arose just about that city centre residents felt that they were overlooked. So it's just more also the planning that we do in between emergencies, just to ensure that there's systems in place that responds to the residents' needs. And I guess they're just concerned that they didn't really get follow-up from the last experiences. So this just sort of exacerbates it. But appreciate it might not be possible, like what's possible now might be limited.
Oh, thanks, Pip.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mace. If you just want a brief comment on that, I'm quite keen just to start to wrap this up fairly soon.
Certainly, just to provide assurance that Auckland Emergency Management will reach out and with the Central City Residents Association for that resilient planning and communication. We have also asked the All of Government Group to prepare some specific guidelines for those people who live in high density living spaces, and that's been committed to, so we'll hopefully have that within the next short while. But appreciate your comment.
Yep, that's helpful. Thanks, Mace. Councillor Daniel Newman.
Oh, look, thank you, Your Worship. I had a question, but can I just say that a real commendation to Phil and to Mace and to Greg Morgan, all the council officers, and you, Your Worship, and all of the elected members. Actually, I've never been this proud of this council and the all of government response as I have been during this lockdown. It's been amazing. It's been an unprecedented time, and it's been a real privilege to have been part of this, and everybody's got their stories, but I just wanted to acknowledge everyone for the work that they are doing. My question relates to the security of vaccination supply as we move through to the end of September. As we move down the age cohorts and more and more people are now able to get the Pfizer vaccine, that should result in a higher proportion of Māori and Pacifica people who, of course, are more represented in that younger age cohort. And to date, we've had two primary challenges. One is around the booking, which works for people who are proactive, but not necessarily for those people who are not used to going through that channel. And the second has been the capacity to accommodate the demand. And we've seen that really stretch during recent times with a surge in demand for testing. As we move down through the lockdown levels, so as to enable more walk-ups and drive-through without bookings, it raises concern for me as to whether we can maintain the high level of engagement and uptake, which absolutely needs to be a priority for Auckland, and match that with the continual supply of the Pfizer vaccine, because at some point, if we continue to achieve the sort of rate of uptake that we've got at the moment, if that can be sustained, we will almost certainly run out of the supply to meet the demand at a given point in time. So can I ask both Phil and Phil to take that matter up with Auckland Regional Public Health and with the Cabinet and report back to us around ensuring that we can sustain the supply of the Pfizer vaccine, and if we start to, if that surge in demand for it starts to compromise supply, that Auckland does need to be prioritised, because this really is ground zero for these for this Delta outbreak, and the best way to counter that, of course, is through the supply of the vaccine and the uptake of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Daniel. I talked yesterday with Matt Hannett, who is the lead person on vaccination at the Northern Regional Health Authority. He said there is no immediate risk of running out, but I did notice the Minister say yesterday if we stayed at 80,000 vaccinations a day, there would be a period of time towards the end of next month before the additional millions of vaccination doses arrive in October. So we'll continue to push that, and we'll continue to push for the need for Auckland as the epicentre of this COVID breakout to be prioritised in terms of the availability of the vaccine and the staff. The good thing with staffing at the moment is that people from the public and the private sector health areas that can't work because of a level 4 lockdown, the surgery that's a non-essential surgery, they are now helping out, so that's really helped with the staffing in Auckland at the present time. That will be a short-term boost for us in being able to do more, but I take your point. Last question comes from Councillor Wayne Walker, please.
Sure. I just want to raise some questions around protecting council. One of the issues that's arising is around the access on the part of organisations to know whether their staff and the like are vaccinated or unvaccinated. So I just want to raise that as an issue, particularly because our main building has obviously got lifts and the opportunity for people to get aerosols and the like comparatively easily. And just in respect of the wider issue that was raised earlier around the zoo, where you don't want the whole zoo, for example, having to lose all its staff, are we looking at some form of pod system if we don't have it already in place, so that the whole organisation doesn't go down, or parts of it if something happens? And the other related issue of obviously that's been of concern in the media is the proximity of the Crown Plaza and the issues there, and quite obviously a high degree of care needs to be taken on our part because we're directly opposite. So just a few issues that go to the integrity of council and its operations.
Thank you, Wayne. Any comment from Phil or Mace?
Your Worship, just to say we're well across considering those types of issues for the workplace. I will ask if Paul Robertson has a comment to make on it. Paul, are you online? It seems not, Your Worship. Look, just to say that the crisis, we have firstly a crisis management team looking at those organisational and staffing issues. They have considered those issues. We do have good protocols, good plans in place, and we absolutely adhere to the guidance from the Ministry of Health in relation to those workplace matters. Obviously, we're very conscious of the wider wider well-being and health and safety obligations in this space. So I can assure councillors that that's front of mind.
Sorry, Wayne. I think I'm just going to have to wind it up at this point. There were others that were wanting questions, and I've said that we've got a pretty long agenda to get through today. What I am proposing to do, however, is to try to get a weekly briefing, probably for 45 minutes, and with members of the governing body and probably local board members, so we can have a weekly update on the things that are happening and how we need to respond to them. We did that last time around, and I am aware that there are a lot of questions, and I think it's quite useful to have the forum. So probably on a Monday, and probably reasonably early, maybe about 8 o'clock, I'll ask Sandra to set something up there. I'll put the motion of receiving the reports and thanking those that have been responsible for giving them. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried. And if we now just have maybe if we have a 7-minute break through to 11:30 to give our audio people time just to remedy some of the difficulties we've got there. And we'll come back to deal with the rest of the governing body agenda at 11:30. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor.